The air was thick with incense and something heavier, something unseen. Shadows flickered against the stone walls as candle flames danced wildly, though there was no wind. The chanting around me grew louder, voices blending into a haunting hum, ancient and commanding. I sat in the center, my pulse matching the rhythmic beat of the ceremonial drum. My hands trembled, but not from fear. It was power. Raw, unfiltered power coursing through me. The ritual was working. A chalice was placed before me, filled with a dark, viscous liquid. The final step. I had done this before, dozens of times. Each ceremony, each invocation had brought me closer to the truth, closer to the forces that ruled beyond the veil. I lifted the cup, the metallic scent of blood mixing with the incense. Around me, the others watched in silence. Eyes gleamed. From behind their masks, expectant, waiting, I drank. The taste was sharp, bitter, burning down my throat like liquid fire. My vision blurred for a moment, and then it began. A surge of energy slammed into my chest. My breath hitched. My veins burned as if they carried molten lava. I had felt this before, but never like this. It was overwhelming, suffocating. The room tilted. The walls stretched, twisted. The faces around me distorted, their features elongating into something inhuman. I tried to focus, to steady myself, but my limbs felt heavy. My heart pounded erratically, too fast. Something was wrong. A cold grip seized my spine, my lungs constricted. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the chanting. I gasped, clutching my chest. A sharp, searing pain exploded inside me. My body convulsed, muscles locking, vision darkening. The figures around me remained still, watching, unmoving. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't obey. My throat clenched shut. I was suffocating. The candles flickered violently, the shadows stretching, expanding. The walls were breathing. The air grew dense, pressing against me. Then I felt it, a presence. Not the one I had called, not the one I had served, something else, something greater. Terror gripped me, raw and primal. My mind screamed for control, but I was powerless. The room, the voices, the ritual, everything shattered into a void of absolute silence. And then I was falling. I had spent my entire life searching for power, not the kind that came from money. Influence or reputation, those were illusions, temporary and fragile. I craved something deeper, something beyond the limits of this world. I wanted to understand the forces that shaped reality, to control them, to stand above the weak and the blind, who clung to their fragile faith. I had no faith. Not in God, not in salvation. The idea of a benevolent creator disgusted me. A deity that demanded worship, submission, obedience, a lie designed to control the masses. The weak knelt, the strong rose. That was the only truth I had ever known. As a child, I had watched my parents pray to a God who never answered. I saw them struggle, suffer, beg for help that never came. The church was filled with empty words, empty hands, reaching for something that did not exist, and so I rejected it. By the time I was a teenager, I had already begun to explore the forbidden. Books on ancient rituals, hidden knowledge, practices long condemned by the same hypocrites who claimed to follow the light. They called it darkness, evil. But to me, it was freedom. The deeper I went, the more I learned. And the more I learned, the more power I gained. By my 20s, I was part of something greater, a society hidden in the shadows, a network of those who understood the truth. We did not kneel before gods. We became them. I learned how to shift the energy of a room, how to manipulate the will of others, how to invoke forces that most feared to even acknowledge. And it worked. My life became untouchable. Opportunities unfolded before me like a script written in my favor. Wealth found its way into my hands. Those who stood in my way simply moved. The world bent to my will, and I reveled in it. But power always demands a price. I had seen others lose control, consumed by forces they once commanded. I had watched men and women wither into husks, their minds shattered by the very things they worshipped. That would not happen to me. I was smarter, stronger. I knew how to keep control. I was careful. Until the night of the ritual, this was supposed to be the next step, the final initiation into the higher ranks of our order. I had been chosen to lead the ceremony, to act as the vessel to open a gateway that had remained sealed for centuries. It was an honor, a privilege. I had no fear. I should have known that I was nothing more than a pawn, that the forces I served had never been under my control. That I had been following whispers into the dark, blind to the truth that waited for me on the other side, and now I was falling. I was falling, not through air, not through space. This was something else, a descent beyond time, beyond matter, beyond anything I had ever known. The darkness around me wasn't just absence of light. It was alive. It wrapped around me, pressed against my skin like a living thing. I tried to scream, but there was no sound, no air, no voice. I had no body. I was nothing, and yet I was aware. I could feel something pulling me downward. No, not downward. There was no direction here, just movement, just sinking. Shapes flickered in the void. Shadows shifting, whispering. The voices were familiar. At first, I thought they belonged to my brothers, the ones I had shared rituals with, the ones who had stood beside me in the circle. But the more I listened, the more I realized. These voices had always been here. Laughing, mocking, waiting, the warmth of the living world was gone. All that remained was cold, endless, and absolute. The deeper I went, the louder the laughter became, the more the whispers twisted into words. You thought you were in control. You thought you had power. You were ours from the beginning. A terror I had never known clawed through me. I had spent years summoning these voices. I had trusted them, believed them, and now they revealed themselves for what they truly were. I wasn't their master. I was their prey. Something moved in the darkness, a figure, no, many figures. They drifted toward me, their shapes flickering, shifting, stretching. I recognized some of them, men I had known, men who had walked this path before me, leaders, priests of the order, men who had promised power, enlightenment, eternity. Now they were nothing but hollow things trapped in this endless abyss. Their eyes, once filled with arrogance and certainty, were now wide with terror. They reached. For me, their fingers clawing at the air, their mouths opening in silent screams. I tried to pull away, but there was no escape. Join us. The voices were inside me now, echoing through every part of my being. I felt them crawling beneath my skin, slipping into my thoughts. And then, a break in the darkness, a light, blinding, pure, cutting through the void like a blade. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in agony. The whispers turned to screams. The hands clawing at me disintegrated into nothing. The light grew, expanding, consuming everything. And then I saw him, standing in the center of it all, watching me. His presence was overwhelming. It wasn't just light, it was knowing. Every thought, every action, every secret I had ever buried was exposed before him. I had spent my life denying him, cursing him, mocking those who followed him, and yet, here he was, Jesus. Not as a distant myth, not as a name spoken in derision. He was real, more real than anything I had ever known. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. I had spent my entire existence believing I was in control. But now, before him, I was nothing, and he was everything. His eyes met mine, and in that instant I felt it. The weight of every sin, every deception, every moment I had rejected him, and worst of all, I felt his sorrow, not anger, not condemnation, sorrow. He had been there, watching, waiting, reaching for me all my life. And I had turned away, and then he spoke. Do you understand now? The words weren't a question. They were a revelation. I had been blind, deceived, led astray by forces that had never wanted my enlightenment, only my destruction. I tried to answer. I wanted to beg, to plead, to fall at his feet. But before I could, the light exploded around me and I was ripped away. I was no longer falling. The darkness had vanished, swallowed by the blinding radiance that surrounded me. It wasn't just light. It was something far greater. It was him. Jesus. I had spent my life denying his existence, mocking those who followed him, preaching a different truth, one where I was the master of my fate, where I had control. But here, in his presence, every lie, every deception I had built my life upon crumbled. I had never been in control. I had never held power. I had been a puppet, led by whispers, serving forces that had never wanted my enlightenment, only my destruction. And now, stripped of all illusion, I stood before the one I had rejected. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I wasn't bound, but I couldn't run. I wasn't gagged, but I had no words. His gaze held me where I was, not in anger, not in hatred, but in knowing. He saw everything, every sin, every ritual, every moment I had led others down the same path of deception. And he was sorrowful, not enraged, not condemning, but grieving. For me, for those who had been deceived as I had been, for those who would never return. His voice was not like the whispers I had once followed. It didn't echo in manipulation, twisting into lies. It was truth itself. You sought power, he said. His words didn't cut me. They didn't wound me like a weapon. They revealed me. You sought knowledge. Yes, I had. I had spent years chasing secrets, hidden wisdom, ancient rituals, but you never sought me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that I had been misled, that I hadn't known, that I had never truly understood what I was doing. But I couldn't, because I had known. Deep down, I had always known. I had seen the truth countless times, moments when he had reached for me, through people, through warnings, through an unexplainable sense that I was walking towards something I wasn't supposed to find. And I had ignored him. The realization struck me harder than any physical pain I had ever felt. I had been given so many chances. I had turned away from all of them. Tears burned my eyes. My soul felt raw, exposed, laid bare before the one who had always been there. You were deceived, he said, not in accusation, but in sorrow. And you deceived others. Faces flashed before me, people I had led down the same path. People who had trusted me, who had followed me into the dark, believing my words, believing the same lies I had embraced. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to undo it all. I never knew you. The words shattered through me like thunder. I had heard them before, mocked them, dismissed them as nothing more than religious fear-mongering. Now I felt the weight of them. To be unknown by him, it was the worst fate imaginable. But then, a pause, a shift in the air. I looked up, trembling, barely able to meet his gaze, and in his eyes I saw something beyond sorrow. Mercy, a chance, a choice. Return. The word rang through me, shaking me to my core. Tell them. The world around me blurred. The light grew brighter, hotter, until it consumed everything. I felt myself being pulled away, ripped from the presence of God, from the place where truth reigned, back to the world I had once ruled. And as I was cast back into the darkness, I screamed. I woke up screaming. My lungs burned as if I had been drowning. My body convulsed, every nerve in my skin alight with electricity. Cold air flooded my chest. My vision swam with distorted shapes and blurred faces hovering above me. "He's back!" someone shouted. Hands grabbed my shoulders, pinning me down. The room was spinning, the walls pulsating like a living thing. I gasped, struggling to breathe, my mind still trapped between two realities. I wasn't supposed to be here. I had seen the truth. I had been sent back. The chanting was gone. The flames that once lined the walls had been extinguished. The figures in black robes, the leaders of the ritual, were no longer chanting. They were staring. Their eyes were not filled with relief. They were filled with fear. I felt the cold stone beneath me, the remnants of the ritual symbols drawn in blood still smeared across my skin. My clothes were drenched in sweat, my pulse hammered against my skull, and then silence. Someone stepped forward. Nathaniel, the high priest, the one who had led me through every initiation, every ritual, every dark secret I had ever uncovered. His face was unreadable, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You were dead," he said. His voice wasn't filled with concern. It wasn't relief. It was something else, something calculated. I forced myself to sit up, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. My throat was raw, my hands were shaking. They were waiting for me to speak. They needed to know what I had seen. They needed to know if the ritual had worked. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. If I told them the truth, if I told them who I had seen, what he had told me, they would never let me leave this place alive. I looked at Nathaniel, then at the others. They were watching me, waiting, their expressions shifting from confusion to suspicion. I saw... My voice cracked. I had to choose my words carefully. Nathaniel took another step closer. "Who did you see?" he asked. I met his gaze, heart pounding, and then I made my choice. "I saw nothing," I lied. His eyes narrowed. Silence stretched between us. I could feel my pulse in my throat. For a moment I thought he believed me. Then, "He's lying," a voice said. The word sent a chill through me. I turned my head sharply. It was Elena, another high-ranking member of the Order. Her face was pale, but her expression was hard. She had seen something in my eyes. Nathaniel studied me again. "You saw something," he said. My hands clenched into fists. The room felt smaller. The air thickened with something heavy, something dangerous. They would kill me, I knew it. If they found out the truth, if they knew that I had seen him, that I had been sent back to expose everything, they wouldn't let me leave. "I saw shadows," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't remember." Nathaniel stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Lies," Elena hissed. I had to get out. Now, I pushed myself to my feet, my legs unsteady. Nathaniel took a step back, watching me carefully. "You should rest," he said, but his voice was void of concern. "The ritual was difficult. It takes time to recover." No, he didn't want me to recover. He wanted to keep me here. They knew. They didn't know what I had seen, but they knew I wasn't telling the truth. And if I stayed, they would make sure I never spoke another word. I turned toward the door. My breath came in short gasps. Every muscle in my body screamed in exhaustion, but I forced myself to move. Step, another step. Nathaniel didn't stop me. Neither did the others. But I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I reached the door. My hand shook as I grabbed a handle. I stepped into the hallway, and then a whisper, "You won't leave this alive." My blood ran cold. I turned my head just enough to see Elena's face in the dim candlelight. She wasn't threatening me. She was promising me. I stumbled down the corridor, my heart racing. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had to play this carefully. They would come for me, and when they did, I had to be ready, because now I knew the truth, and I would tell the world, no matter what it cost me.